This video is for page 267, lesson 1, about solving equations with rational coefficients. The topics that we are going to be talking about in this video are for inverse, properties of multiplication, and solving equations with decimal coefficients. You should be copying this into your workbook as we go through the video. Two numbers with the product of 1, such as 3/4 and 4/3, are called reciprocals or multiplicative inverses. So let's go through a couple definitions. We're going to define multiplicative inverses. This is two fractions that multiply to give you 1. And let's describe what this means. This means that the numerator and the denominator of a fraction switch places. Some examples of this would be 2/3 and 3/2, or 3/2, and 1/2 and 2/1. List some non-examples. So some non-examples would be, say, 2 1/3 and 7/3. These are not the same because the numerator and denominator are not switched places. Another example would be 1/2 of a non-example and -1/2. Again, the numerator and denominator did not switch. Even though the sign switched, the numerator and denominator did not switch. So the next part is to describe how the multiplicative inverse is used in division of fractions. So when you're dividing fractions, you multiply the dividend by the multiplicative inverse of the divisor. So the dividend is the bottom and the numerator, and the divisor is the denominator. So we're going to write, when you divide fractions, you multiply the dividend by the multiplicative inverse of the divisor. So you're just flipping the numerator and the denominator. A real-world connection. How can the action of a motorcyclist in the photo help you remember what the multiplicative inverse is? Well, we see that it is flipped over, so the motorcyclist is flipped. Just like the numerator and the denominator would flip. So let's go to the next page, and we are going to talk about the inverse property of multiplication. So when we have the product of the number and its multiplicative inverse, then they equal 1. So this would be the symbol here, AB times B over A equals 1. So the numerical factor of a term that contains the variable is called the coefficient. So the number in front of the variable is called the coefficient, and the variable itself, no matter what letter it's used to represent, is called the variable. So in the equation 3/4 C equals 18, the coefficient of C is a rational number. Because it's a fraction, it's rational. And the equation can be solved when the coefficient is a fraction by multiplying by the multiplicative inverse. There's our vocabulary word. multiplicative inverse. So now we are going to solve the equation. So we have 3/4 c equals 18. If I want to solve this equation, I have to use the multiplicative inverse of 3/4, which is the reciprocal. So I'm going to flip 3/4 and I'm going to get 4/3. When that happens, notice the 4 divides by 4 to get 1, 3 divides by 3 to get 1. So I'm left with just the variable c. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I am going to multiply 18 times 4/3, and I'm going to get 18 times 4, or you can see how it simplifies. 18 divided by 3 is 6, and 6 times 4 is 24. So c equals 24. You can always check your answer by plugging 24 into the variable c, and you find out that you get the correct answer of 18. So now I want you to use that information, and I want you to check your answers. Pause the video now and try A through D, and then you can see what the answer choices are. Okay, so for A, you should have gotten 60. For B, you should have gotten -18. For C, you should have 9. And for D, you should have 28. Moving on to the next example. Notice that in this problem we have 1 and 1/2 s equals 16 and 1/2. So what we need to do here is we need to convert these mixed numbers into improper fractions. We do that by taking the denominator times the whole number, so 2 times 1, and then we're going to add the numerator. So 2 times 1 plus 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. Plus 1 is 3, so we have 3/2. We do the same thing to the next side, so 2 times 16 is 32, plus 1 is 33. So now our improper fractions is 3/2s equals 33/2. We need to then multiply by the multiplicative inverse, so we're going to flip the fraction that's next to the variable. So we're moving the coefficient away from the variable. So we're going to multiply by 2/3 on both sides, canceling out the coefficient, multiplying the 33/2 times 2/3, so that we get an answer of 11. You can always check your answers with that. So first step is we need to convert it to an improper fraction, then multiply by the multiplicative inverse. So try D, E, and F on your own. Pause the video now so that you can try those. For D, you should get 1 and 1/4, or 5/4. For E, you should get -11 and 17/77. That one was a hard one because of the big numbers. And for F, you should get 2 and 2/5. Now on to solving with decimals. We still have to do the same thing. So when you have an equation such as this, the coefficient of n is a decimal. We're going to solve the equation with the decimal coefficient by dividing each side of the equation by the coefficient. So if I have 3.15 equals 0.45n, I'm going to divide both sides by 0.45 so that I can get n by itself. Use your calculator and you can get 3.15 divided by 0.45, and you get an answer of 7. We check our answer by plugging in 7 to the original equation and making sure that you come out to the same answer. Go ahead and try G, H, and I. Pause the video now. For G, you should get 7. For H, you should get -1.5. And for I, you should get 2.3. Last example is a word problem. Okay? Go ahead and read the word problem now. Latoya's softball team won 75% or 18 of its games. Define the variable, then write and solve the equation to determine the number of games the team played. So we know that LaToya's softball team won 18 games, and we know that that was 75% of the games played. Let N represent the number of games. So we don't know how many games it is, so that's defining the variable, saying that N is going to represent the total number of games. So then we have to convert our percentage to a decimal by moving the decimal place from behind the 5 2 places representing 100%, so that we get 0.75. 0.75 of the number of games equals 18. So 0.75 N equals 18. Then we have to divide by the decimal 0.75 using your calculator. 18 divided by 0.75 is 24. Then we write a sentence explaining what 24 means. 24 means that LaToya's softball team played 24 games total. For the remainder of your homework, I would like you to work on the guided practice problems on page 270. That is 1 through 5, guided practice problems, 1 through 5. Have that complete for tomorrow.